Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Let's Talk About America. Things are going to be a little bit different in this episode. It's going to be the beginning of sort of a new series. Usually the episodes are more podcast style, sort of a verbal monologue, getting things off my chest that I think about the world. But I want to try something a little different. I want to start a sort of what you didn't know type series. There are things in the world that affect America, affect Americans, and affect people worldwide at that I think a lot of people may not be privy to, may not have heard about. And if I can just, expose a few of these things, to you and let you go from there and discover about them what you will, that's always good. This election cycle coming up, there are a lot of things that have affected elections in the past and will indeed affect elections this year. So I think it's great to sort of get some of these points and topics out there in the open and spread to more people so they can be aware of them. And I'm going to start this episode by doing three government spy programs that you probably never heard of, and I think you should have heard of because they are being used daily and will continue most likely to be used. Some of them are 20, 30 years old at this point. They have all three clearly been exposed in the past. And, when I was younger, this was sort of a topic that everyone got up in arms about. This was something that people didn't like. There were protests about it, riots about it. People on both sides of the aisle, left and right, sort of agreed that we didn't like the U.S. government and, governments worldwide are doing this. It's not solely on the U.S., but, we are the absolute masters of it. So, I just want to get you in on this. And hopefully you can use this information and go learn a bit more about it yourself. Thank you very much, and let's get right into it.
Well, put it this way. You're sitting in your living room, and the police walk into your house and start rifling through your desk. If you've done nothing wrong, you shouldn't be worried about that. No, that's not the way our American system works.
Everybody is a target. The government is collecting information about everybody, and that's no longer, just speculation.
I'm not anti-government. I'm just pro-freedom.
All right, so the first program I'm going to put you on to is a little program that Edward Snowden told us about in 2013 called PRISM. Now, PRISM was the NSA program dedicated to domestic surveillance. So, surveillance based on the metadata, communications on U.S. citizens inside the boundaries of the United States. I'm going to put you on a little video here so you can find out more about it.
The National Security Agency and FBI have been amassing a vast trove of communications data that was, until just recently, undisclosed to the public. One part is the phone call records of millions of Americans. A second is codenamed PRISM and involves the collection of communications via some of the largest tech companies in the U.S. How does PRISM work? The point of the $20 million program is to find the proverbial needle in the haystack using advanced data mapping technologies. As the former chief counsel to the House Intelligence Committee described it to the Wall Street Journal, the PRISM database is the haystack. The program, according to a document leaked to the Washington Post and The Guardian, taps into the central servers of Apple, YouTube, Skype, Facebook, Google, AOL, Paltalk, Yahoo, and Microsoft. All these companies deny granting the government direct backdoor access to their servers. The Obama administration says the program only targets foreigners. People outside the U.S. are some of the heaviest users of these company services. How does the government get access to this data? Agency officials must ask the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to issue orders to the companies requiring them to share their data. The court was established in the late 1970s to guard against surveillance abuses. It has 11 U.S. District Court judges selected by the Chief Justice of the United States who serve staggering terms of up to 7 years. A single judge reviews a warrant application. Are these requests on the rise? Yes. In 2008, there were fewer than 25, but applications to the court have exploded in recent years, with over 200 last year. How many requests has the court denied? None.
Okay, so the main way that this worked was that the NSA would contact large tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, what have you, and they would just request any backdated data that they were going to discard or that they no longer had space for. So the NSA would just take it, say, I'm sure they made up some whatever excuse, but clearly they found value in it. Now you may say, this is not legal, is it, for the United States government to be spying on U.S. citizens domestically, well, or abroad, but especially domestically? The answer is no. But I'll explain in a moment how they got around this legally, and it's quite a ingenious method, if I do say so myself. But first, I want to point out that the NSA was not only spying on citizens. The NSA was spying on military personnel, politicians, intergovernmental organizations, NGOs. They were spying on embassies around the world, diplomatic staff, heads of state. They were spying on NATO and the UN. Now, this is breaking rule number 1 of international diplomacy, is most governments don't care what other governments do on the world stage as long as they stay out of their business. Now, it would be no surprise, for instance, if we found out that the United States government was spying on Russian politicians or North Korea or Chinese businessmen. We would expect it. That's part of their job description, to spy on those that rightfully or wrongfully we deem our opponents on the global stage. But when it came to light that the U.S. was spying on allies, on Germany, on the UK itself, on Switzerland, on NATO, we were spying on a military organization that we are the head of and that we basically control.
Bursting Brussels' bubble, it appears the US National Security Agency has been spying on the EU institutions. German magazine Der Spiegel's online edition cited a top-secret document which outlines how the NSA specifically targeted EU offices in Washington, Brussels and New York, listening to phone calls and accessing internal computer networks. According to Der Spiegel, the EU had discovered telephone taps in its internal network around 5 years ago, but no source is cited. The file is the latest in a series of documents whistleblower Edward Snowden made available to journalists, causing diplomatic embarrassment to President Obama's administration.
The German magazine Der Spiegel and Britain's Guardian newspaper claim to have evidence showing that the United States National Security Agency bugged the European Union mission in New York and its embassy in Washington. The EU summoned the US ambassador and ordered a sweep of its offices to check for devices. Stefan Seibert, a spokesperson for German Chancellor Angela Merkel, said Washington needs to explain.
It has to be cleared up, and if it turned out to be true, that would be unacceptable. We are no longer in the Cold War.
Now, that did not sit well with a lot of politicians and people in higher seats of power. So there was for a moment it seemed like there was actually a bit of a fuss-up going to occur. There were heads of state that traveled all the way to Washington, D.C. just to meet Obama and complain about it. But at the end of the day, nothing was done, nothing changed, and everyone sort of forgot it and moved on with their lives. Now, you may be asking how we were able to spy on ourselves, how the U.S. was able to spy on citizens inside the U.S., and this is, like I said, a very ingenious method, and the answer relies heavily on the Five Eyes organization. Now, if you've never heard of the Five Eyes, this is a intergovernmental intelligence group that is forced by the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, respectively. They mostly, in the US, it's especially illegal to spy on US citizens, without a warrant, that is. They mostly sort of have the same rules and regulations in the other 4 countries to a lesser degree. But the easy way around this was simple. The US was spying on UK citizens. They were spying on Australian citizens, Canadian citizens, Kiwis, and everybody else was spying on everybody else, and everybody else was spying on us. So at the end of the day, these agencies, the GCHQ, the NSA, whatever crazy moose riding cartoon intelligence services they have up in Canada, they would all sit around and they would just trade information like Pokemon cards. The US would give the UK the information they had collected on their citizens. The Canadians would give the information they had collected on New Zealand citizens to them, and vice versa. So there was no actual spying done by each citizen's representative government. They were just being traded on some sort of intelligent black market. And like I said, this is clearly no one's been in trouble for it. It's still ongoing. The UN didn't have any complaints about it. No one really was brought to any sort of justice. The program continues now, so it's something that clearly no one's disagreeing that is acceptable and or legal. So beware of this, that if you are unlucky enough not to be an American, not all of us can be so blessed, know that your data is daily being collected by the United States and then being traded or sold to whoever needs it or wants it. And this is in conjunction with big tech corporations, Google, Apple, all these, Microsoft. They harvest this data like it's manna straight from the heart, and they do what they want with it. So I know it's hard in this day and age to care about your digital footprint or care about the data that you're putting out into the world, but maybe be a little more attentive, a little more focused on what you're doing. And whether you're doing anything wrong or not, your privacy is your privacy. You wear clothes for a reason. You lock your doors for a reason. It's because everyone deserves their individual space and autonomy. Now, you may ask, how are they doing this? How is the data collected? And this is where the third program, so we have PRISM, we have Dropmire, and the third program that enables all of this is a program called Rampart A. Now, Rampart A is it's another agreement, an international agreement, where the NSA, they want to collect information in between sender and receiver. So, if you mail a letter to your mother, the NSA is not going to read that letter while you have it at your house before you put it in the mailbox. They're not going to read it once your mom picks it up from the mailbox. They would ideally collect that letter in transit on the highway in the mail truck, and they try to read it then. So the way this works with digital data is that there are two types of methods for transferring digital data in today's age. That's through satellite reception and through fiber optic cables, most of them running underground or undersea. And there are very few companies who control the data that runs through these cables. So all that the NSA did was, they created an agreement with these few companies, and they said, we want to tap in to this data cable, and we just want to copy everything that runs through, every single thing that runs through, and that goes for everything. That goes for trades on the stock market. If you're a trader in London and you're trading on the New York Stock Exchange, every buy and sell that you put in has got to travel through fiber optic cables underneath the Atlantic Ocean, and every single one of them is getting intercepted and copied. But that goes for things, if you're Googling around and you're in Europe and you're Googling around for things in America, all this information getting copied. There are, of course, cables that run through the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, through the South Atlantic, very few, but there are. And every single one of them is tapped into by the NSA. And some of these cables are nation-owned, not just corporate-owned.
Now that nearly all of us are online, connected, or digital in some way, spies are no longer watching just one or two bad guys. Instead, the UK and US governments are both collecting massive amounts of information from the things we do on our phones and over the internet. There are two main ways they get hold of this information. One way is working with the companies that run these systems and tap the cables that are vital for moving all this information around. They can then sift through the huge amount of data they gather and all the messages that are there and store them in massive computer databases. Their other technique involves using their relationships with technology companies to get hold of things like emails, messages, or other information straight from their US servers. The spy agencies do throw away most of the content they collect. They keep that on their systems for about 3 days, then discard everything that's not from one of their targets. Metadata, though, who sent a message, who it was to, when it was sent, and more, is a different matter. The agencies keep almost all the metadata they see for around a month in the UK and up to a year in the US. That lets them build up profiles of millions of people, who talks to who knows who, and where people are if need be. These revelations pose many questions. What is the balance between our right to privacy and the authorities' duty to protect us?
So, for instance, there are some cables that run from Denmark to Norway, Sweden, Finland, and these are very valuable cables because they also run into Russia. Now, if the NSA, for instance, wants to access these Danish-owned cables, of course, Denmark is going to say, well, you're not allowed to spy on Danish citizens. And the U.S. will say, yeah, no problem. Okay, we won't. And they will also have an agreement with the German government and their cables. And the German government will say, you are not allowed to spy on German citizens. And The NSA will say, of course, yes, no spying on German citizens. So what they do is they use the Danish cables to spy on the Germans and the Germans to spy on the Danish. And then they have the information they were originally wanting, and they have they fulfilled their negotiations. They fulfilled their requirements with both countries. So again, we have an entire network of data that travels globally, and the NSA, we know, this is not a surprise to anyone. It shouldn't be. But the reason I'm making this video is hopefully to, just bring a little bit of awareness to anyone who maybe has never paid attention to this or never thought to look into any of this. This is all information that's been readily available at least since, the Snowden leaks, so 10 years or more now. And some of it has been available since the late 90s. These are not extremely secretive programs. They are in cooperation with huge tech conglomerates, so they've been out in the public sphere for ages. But that said, these tools have the ability to influence, the coming election. These are the same tools that were used in 2016 and 2020 when people were saying that there was some sort of interference with the election, that there were Russian bot farms and internet trolls who were attempting to sabotage the election in favor of Donald Trump. Any information that would have been gleaned about the election results would have come from the NSA collecting that information using these tools. Now, I'm not saying one way or another if any of those allegations are true. That's a topic for a different video. But if any of that information was collected, it would have come from these programs and this infrastructure of Rampart A. So that said, we've got to understand this year as well, there is going to be an influx of information floating around the internet. There's going to be, and it is getting crazier and crazier every year. So now we've got memes, we've got chat groups, we've got Discord channels and WhatsApp groups and, everything, and Facebook pages of everything. Every bit of that is going to be analyzed, every single bit. So know that not everything you see online is going to be true. Not everything that you hear from people in your day-to-day life is going to be true, because they are also going to be exposed to the same sort of information. So we have to know that everything we're doing is going to be analyzed, and everything that is analyzed is going to be used most likely for nefarious purposes by a slew of parties. And some of them are going to be on your political side of the aisle, and some are going to be on your opponent's side of the aisle. That's just the way the game of politicking works. Anyway, hopefully you can research about these topics a little bit more, and thank you for listening. If you have any ideas or information for me that you would like me to post or make a video about in the coming weeks, please leave a comment or personally message me. You can follow me on Twitter at LTAA137, Let's Talk About America, or on Instagram at Let's Talk About America. Feel free to let me know what you'd like to see a video about. Thank you very much, and goodbye.